gadal veis kadosh shemero
Amen.
Vayol modir khirusei vayam lich malchusei Yvoye Yvoye the whole base is through wail Yvoye the whole base is through wail Vagolo Ivid man hori Vayimri To jest meine Tatuniu, Budzisz wakti Gatuniu, Budzisz warti noch wejmen, Farbu sollst die auch meine Schumme nehmen. Oh, gießt meine Tränen und weiß mir, ihr sollt nur gießen, mein Taten den Süßen, hat euch entrissen. Oh, mein Tatunu, hast die gelost, doch heil Kind. Oh, Jusen bin ich, oh, ich weiß mir, was ist. Oh,
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. This is a very, very special morning, and we are so delighted to have Avi Hoffman and Miriam Hoffman, and we're going to get started very soon. I just want to say a couple words. This was such a strange morning with the time change and the weather change. When I went out to get my newspaper this morning, it was freezing outside. But we are absolutely delighted to have this presentation this morning. And this is brought to us by our wonderful partnership with the Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Miami. And at this point, I would like to remind everybody we're not going to interrupt the presentation. If you have any questions, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards, please post your questions in the chat, and let us now turn over this program to the Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Miami. By the way, how many of you are fluent in Yiddish? Just curious. Raise your hand. Yes. Very good. Very good. Anyway, I'm going to introduce Yoram Millman, who is the program director for the Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Miami. And we have the president here also, Paulette. And so I'm not sure if Yoram and Paulette, which one wants to begin the presentation, but please do.
Boker Tov, good morning. Can you hear me all? Yes?
Yes.
Good. Well, some of you might really question, what does the Bobemeises or the Mises have to do with genealogy? And the answer is, this is a part of our legacy. You know, if you walk in Tel Aviv today and you go and have Shalom Aleichem, and you will ask, excuse me, where is the Chav Mentale Mocher Sfarim? And they will tell you, it's 3 blocks from here. Or you want to go to look for Yud Lamed Peretz. I mean, all these tales are being recorded today as street names. And, you know, it's amazing. And I'm so delighted to have 2 of the probably most influential representative of our legacy in not only in our community, but even on a universal level. I'm so delighted to have them, volunteering to be our host today. Anyway, Avi Hoffman was recently awarded a congressional recognition. And he was invited to the Vatican to meet Pope Francis. And if you don't believe it, just go to Facebook and you can see his picture with the Pope, actually. He was inducted into Rome's Jewish Hall of Fame for his lifetime work, advancing Jewish culture, Yiddishkeit, and Holocaust awareness through the charities that he founded, known as Yiddishkeit Initiative Incorporation, which the website is whyilovejewish.org. As an actor, he was nominated for a New York Drama Desk Award for his Yiddish language portrayals of Willie Loman in Death of Salesman. He is best known for his 3 Jewish trilogy, award-winning one-man shows, which is 2 Jewish, 2 Jewish 2, and recently Still Jewish After All These Years. A long list of credit for his performance include from PBS, Performance of the Year 95, New York Press Magazine, LA Ovation Award for Best Actor in Musical 2001, in New York Drama Desk and Outer Circles Award nomination. You know, I could not memorize it, you know, too many awards, and really, I mean, it's amazing. On TV, he was featured as Sid Raskin in the Stars TV series Magic City, as well as on Netflix with Bloodline, A&E, The Greats, and on ABC series Law and Order. He starred in the international award-winning short Yiddish film Shchita and the motion picture The Imported Bridge Room. He was seen in the PBS documentary They Came From a Good, a history of the Jews in the United States. And Avi has performed all over the world, has numerous acting and directing credits, and has received multiple awards and nominations. I suggest you all, after the event, to go to his website, Why I Love the Yiddish. Avi, it's really our honor to have you, and it's our honor to have Professor Miriam Hoffman with us.
Ashenim Dank. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I think if you can see, my mother is here next to me. She wrote the book, Curious Rabbinic Tales, the shortest tall stories. And of course, my mother was professor of Yiddish at Columbia University in New York City for 25 years. She was a journalist writing a weekly column for the Yiddish Vorwärts, the newspaper, for 35 years. She's an award-winning playwright, which has had plays. She's had plays. She and I have done plays together most of my life. Several of them have won major awards all over the world. And she's an author of several books, which we can talk about later, which you can all, buy on our website or on Amazon. And as Yoram said, our website is whyilovejewish.org, as you can see in the slideshow. So I am going to take over here. Mom, you'll forgive me for a second. So we are going to have a little lecture going through the book, Curious Rabbinic Tales. And at the end, I welcome your questions or comments or anything that I or my mother can try to answer for you and clarify for you. All right? So, Curious Rabbinic Tales, the shortest tall stories. Jewish folk tales actually belong to the earliest folk literature, whose stories probably predate even Jewish sources. Once they were adapted into a Jewish setting, they were integrated into our own Jewish mythology. Folk tales were told as parables with a moral undercurrent to expose human frailty and strength, vanity and heroism. These particular Jewish stories describe wit and wisdom, evil and goodness, and they break down the established norms, unmasking foolish pride and fighting against injustice. The following tales and legends talk about miracles, heroism, and cowardice, but above all, they talk about the poor folk and the wealthy folk. In short, anything that we wouldn't want to say openly, we would disguise it in a parable or a folktale. And I just want to mute everybody else except me. Great, thank you. And so these tales are our most treasured legacy.
Und jetzt, Hannele, die Volkssängerin.
Und als die Mama hat mich geschickt, geholfen, na ja schick, hat sich in mir verliebt, oh ja, Bocher, Aprikaschick, ay, das a Bocher, a scheint und a feins, oi mir vor seine Beinderlich, oi, Ketzele, du meins.
The one and only female pope in the Vatican. Two great Rebbes, Reb Motale Chernobyler, you know what, let me stop my share, Reb Motale Chernobyler of the Chernobyler dynasty in the city of Chernobyl, which is now, of course, in the Ukraine, and Reb Yisroelche Reginer, stemming from the city of Regine. Among them, they conducted an exchange of dialogues and ideas. Each one of them had in mind to outdo the other in their storytelling. And so, Reb Yisroelche Reginer began spinning his tale. He said, one day, a very distressed chassid, a pious Jew, came rushing into the Rebbe's house with a plea. Rebbe, only your blessing can save my wife from her very difficult labor. The Rebbe, realizing that the man was very distraught, tried to comfort him. Not only will I bless you, but I will tell you a story. And so the Regina began to spin his tale, according to the Hasidic tradition. He said, this is a true story about a very bright young woman who lived in Rome, steeped in Catholic lore, but she couldn't attend the Catholic seminary due to the fact that she was a woman. So she decided to disguise herself as a young man, and she attended the Catholic Academy of Rome. As an excellent and valued student of religion, she made a name for herself, and in time she was promoted to the priesthood, and then she became bishop, and then she was appointed the cardinal. Of course, no one suspected that she was a woman. The secret remained with her. And as time passed, the Pope died, and the Vatican was about to select a new Pope in Rome. A search began until they came upon this extraordinary cardinal, and not suspecting that she was a woman, they proclaimed her the Pope over all the Catholics. Now, as it is well known, the priests were sometimes inclined to transgress, to sin on the side. And indeed, it was the new Pope who hung around at night in the streets and the alleys of Rome, while no one suspected that she was the Pope. Not long after, this female Pope discovered that she was with child, pregnant. And due to the fact that the Pope wore very wide garments, no one knew that she was in the family way. Now, it all came to a head during the Christian holiday of Easter, when Rome was beleaguered with an enormous crowd of pilgrims that came from all over the world to celebrate the Easter holiday. And it's said that every year at the same time, a great big podium was erected on the balcony of the Vatican. This was the place where popes could deliver their papal sermons. And the Pope appeared facing the big crowd, but in the middle of her sermon, she went into labor. The pains came on, and before she knew it, she had actually given birth to a bouncing baby boy. The entire Vatican was thunderstruck. The crowd was bewildered. How was it possible? How could it be that the Pope is a mother? But, said the Regina Rebbe, it is known that everything is possible when it comes to the nations of the world, and the same goes for their holy scriptures. Suddenly, the man who came to the Rebbe with the plea to ease his wife's labor pains realized that he had totally forgotten what he came for. So he turned to the Rebbe and he whispered, Rebbe, how does this story relate to me? And the Rebbe says, it has. While you were listening to that story so intently, your wife delivered a healthy baby boy. So now go home and bring up your child steeped in our Jewish traditions. Now, Reb Motale Chernobiller was amazed. He said, I'm baffled that you, Reb Yisrulche, found it appropriate to tell this particular story? And the Regina Rebbe calmed down the Chernobiller, and he said, why are you so amazed, Reb Motale? The power of a story is mightier than the pen, and one can always walk away enriched from a very good story. So here's the footnote to that story. Apparently, there really was a female pope, and apparently she really did give birth, and you can actually find the stories in the first volume of Chernobyl from the Rebbe's Courtyard, which was published in 1931, and also in a book called Pope Joan, which was published in 1998. The book is actually called Buon Appetit, Your Holiness, and it's by Mariangela Rinaldi and Mariangela Vicini, and that chapter is called Pope Joan, who apparently was the Pope from 855 to 858. What an interesting story.
Meierke meine Kind, Erzähl mir, wo's Herz sagt dort in Städtele Azin. Wie seht euch du Schilachu, wo's Fleck stehen bei Milachu. Erzähl mir, ich bete dich, meine Kind. Bin je mein, welk ist dein Begehr? Oi, bin je mein, und der Herr sagt ihn, or Herr. Du steitele, du Kleinike, die Gesselach, die Scheinike, seinen zu brocken, zu brennen. Nicht du schön, du Schilachu, so voll ist du Smilachu, die wohl so schön mehr niederkennen.
The Keys. In the city of Proje, not far from Warsaw, in Poland, there lived a very wealthy man who was learned in the Torah and a great charitable Jew. His name was Feiwale Proge. His wife, Ruchel, was a very righteous woman. She was a mother and a great earner, and she was constantly busy. She had a little grocery store, which enabled her husband, Feivel, to sit day and night studying his holy books. His wife, Ruchel, did everything lovingly, as long as her husband was able to sit and study the Torah. Then came the day when Feivel passed away, and the entire city was mourning. For Feivel left behind a great reputation for being a righteous and charitable man, and what he learned when he arrived in heaven was the fact that each and every Jew earns an empty lot in paradise. And each time he performs a good deed, brick by brick is laid. The more good deeds, the more beautiful their heavenly abode turns out to be, until their heavenly home is done, surrounded by vineyards and orange groves, a true paradise. But if a Jew is not pious and does not observe the commandments and doesn't do the good deeds, what grows on his empty lot is stinging nettle and sharp thorns. Now the archangel Gabriel met Reb Feivel at the gate, and he escorted him to paradise. And he displayed before him his beautiful house, a mansion with bright windows and mirrors and mahogany furniture. And when they reached the house, the door was locked. So Reb Feivel asked the angel, "Where are the keys to my palace?" And the good angel replied, "Reb Feivel, dear, the keys remain down below in the lower world in the hands of your wife." "With my wife? Ruchel?" exclaimed Feivel. "What are they doing there? After all, I did all the learning. I studied the Torah day and night. I earned all of the good deeds. Why does she get to keep the keys to this beautiful house in heaven?" And the angel Gabriel answered, "You may have done all the good deeds, but who worried about you and made sure that you had a protected livelihood? Who brought up the children? And who gave you the money to be able to do all those good deeds?" In short, Reb Feivel had to wait at the threshold of his fabulous home until his wife, Ruchel, passed away and brought with her the keys to their fabulous house in heaven. The keys.
Alte Sitzer voll zum Reben. Fortgesinnt in Griesem Reben.
Ah, the foolish folks of Chelm. So most of you probably know that pre-war Chelm was a real Jewish town in Poland. But in our folklore setting, the Chelm was known for its fools. The Chelme Naronim in Yiddish, the foolish folks of Chelm. They were the object of ridicule. They enjoyed great popularity among the Jewish people, and stories were written about the folks of Chelm by the thousands of stories, by many, many different writers. But we didn't invent the town of fools. There were the wise men of Gotham, who were considerably older than the fools of Chelm. The Syrians regarded Homs as their Chelm of dullards. The Persians tell story of Gilan as the town of simpletons. The Greeks had Boeotia, a city of incredibly witless folk. The French scoffed at their countrymen of Saint-Mason. The Scots derided the men of Cooper in Fife. The Germans poked fun at the residents of Swabia and Schildburg. The Italians laughed at the inhabitants of Zago, who apparently fertilized the steeple of their church in order to make it grow taller.
Ah,
Even the good-natured Dutch ascribed stupidity to the Belgians. Now, Chelm was a city in Poland, and although it still exists geographically, it is no longer a Jewish city, because the Holocaust wiped Jewish Chelm off the map. Almost all the Jews of Chelm perished in Auschwitz and Majdanek death camps. But thankfully, the memory of the Chelm Jews, both the wise and the foolish ones, will remain with us forever. But before we pass judgment on the Jews of Chelm, let's listen to an actual meeting that took place at the City Council of New York in the 1940s. Okay, let me mute everybody here. Hold on. I just want to mute everybody. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. So this is an actual true story that was at the City Council of New York in the 1940s. One of the councilmen got up and he said, "To beautify Central Park, I recommend that we import gondolas from Venice, Italy, and let them float around our lake in Central Park. And to save money, I suggest that we import only 2 gondolas from Venice, a male and a female. And when they mate, we will have plenty of gondolas to go around." In case you didn't realize, gondolas, of course, are small boats. And not, of course, animals. So, the foolish folks of Chelm bring us to the story of the Chelemite flood. The story is told about the town of Chelm, where out of the blue the heavens opened up and what came down was a flood, reminiscent of Noah's deluge. It nearly drowned everything in sight. So the Chelemites took off to the Rebbe's house with a plea, "Rebbe Leben, long life to you, Rebbe, do something or we'll all be wiped out and not a sign will remain of us." So the Rebbe ordered that the Chelemites should say special prayers and implore the one above to stop the flood, but to no avail. It became even more severe, as if God's wrath poured out of heaven, consuming the town of Chelm. Finally, the Rebbe came up with an idea. Someone must be carrying out an illicit affair in the shtetl. So I command you all to go out and find the culprits who are committing this abominable sin, and only then will God's wrath be soothed. And so the Chelemites set out to find the culprits. And they searched and they ransacked every home, every corner of town, until they indeed came across a young yeshiva boy who was having an affair, an illicit affair, with a married woman in the town. In a state of rage, they began cursing and throwing rocks at the sinful couple with the idea of stoning them to death. When the Rebbe heard what they were doing, he came running with his fists in the air, out of breath. He shouted at the stone-throwing crowd, Gewalt, Yidden, stop, Jews, what are you doing? You have as much brains in your head as the church has mezuzahs. You idiots, you fools, you could, God forbid, kill the couple. Why aren't you thinking ahead? What if next year we have a drought here in Chelm and we need their services? What will we do then? And that is the Chelemite flood. Now, not to be undone, there is also the story of the Chelemite oven. On a simple old Wednesday, the Jews of Chelm decided to buy an oven for the synagogue. The problem was where to put the oven, what should the oven be made of, and what would be the cost. One day, between the afternoon and the evening prayers, zwischen Minche and Ma'ariv, they assembled to discuss the oven, and one of them said, the oven should be made out of iron. And another one said, I insist that it be made out of tile. And they all decided eventually that iron and tile were too expensive. When Berel, who came from the village, jumped up and said, gentlemen, I will help you. I am blessed with plenty of cows on my farm. I have plenty of flour and butter, more than I need, more than I could sell. So I suggest that we make our oven out of butter, and I will donate it for free. The Chelemites were ecstatic, but one of them shouted out, you must be crazy. The butter will melt in the fire. And the other Chelemites reproached him. And they said, what, would you rather freeze to death? At this point, the Rebbe of Chelm stood up and he pointed his finger at the congregation. Gentlemen, don't be hasty. We cannot make an oven out of butter. It is impossible. And they said, but why, Rebbe, why? He said, for the simple reason that when the eve of Shabbos, when Erev Shabbos arrives, and you are about to put a fleishik chulent, a meat chulent, into the oven, and the oven is dairy, you will have a treif, non-kosher oven on your hands. Have you thought of that? And that, my friends, is the story of the Chelemite oven. But why don't we leave Chelm behind and explore how the rabbis made sense of death? The son of the angel of death. There was a time when the angel of death came down to earth and married a Jewish woman, a real witch. They lived unhappily for many years together until she bore him a son. And when the son turned 15 years old, his father, the angel of death, got bored with his wife, the shrew. He preferred hell to spending more time with her. But he turned to his beloved son and he said, "My son, I advise you to become a doctor. And when you visit a patient who will not survive, you will see me standing at the top of his head, a sign that he will not make it. And if you don't see me, it will be a sign that the patient will survive and get better." That said, the angel of death disappeared, and the son did become a very well-known doctor, famous the world over. As time went by, the king of the land became ill, and no doctor could help him. So the son of the angel of death was invited to heal the king. The ministers were all too clear when they told him, "If the king dies, you will pay with your life." So the son proceeded to examine the king. His pulse was slow, and his breath was belabored. And suddenly, the son spotted his father, the angel of death, at the head of the ill king's bed. He shuddered, and he said to his father, "Father, please get out. My life depends on it." But his father, the angel of death, responded, "The king must die." Now the son realized that the father would not budge unless he threatened him. So he said, "Father, if you don't get out of here right away, I will have no choice but to call mother." And as soon as his father heard his son's warning, he disappeared. And the king got well, and the son got rich. A greater trick. So the Rebbe of Prague was once accosted by a Meshuggah, someone a little out of their mind, a little crazy, who put a pistol to his head. And he said, "I want to see how the Rebbe of Prague jumps out of the 5th floor window and survives." The Rebbe of Prague listened to the demands of the Meshuggah, and he replied, "Oh, what is the big deal? Everyone is capable of jumping from a window and surviving. The greater trick would be to go downstairs and jump up to the 5th floor." And so the Meshuggah agreed, and the Rebbe survived. A greater trick. The man with the glass legs. Reb Dovidel, the Chernobyl Rebbe, was a healer of the sick, a dispenser of blessings, amulets, remedies. As well as being a mystic, he also knew the wisdom of ointments and remedies. All in all, he was a miracle worker. One day he was visited by a man who insisted that he had glass legs. He was afraid to sit down. He was afraid of breaking the glass. So he lived his life in an upright position, always standing. No matter how many times he was told that he didn't have legs made out of glass, it was to no avail. People around him suspected that he was possessed by a dibuk, an evil spirit. So he was taken to the Chernobyl Rebbe to extract the evil spirit out of him. The Rebbe told him to sit down, and the man refused in a wailing voice, "Rebbe, I cannot sit. My legs are made out of glass, and if I will sit down, they will crack." And so the Rebbe shouted out, "I order you to sit down. I command you to sit down." And the man shuddered and trembled with fear. But if the Rebbe commands, he must obey. And he sat down and instantly heard the loud crash of shattering glass. He imagined his glass legs breaking into millions of shards and splinters. But then the man felt his legs, and they were now made out of flesh and bone, just as the Chernobyl Rebbe had predicted. You see, the Rebbe said, the glass broke, but your legs remained intact. And the man was overjoyed, and he went home as if walking on air. And the Rebbe's followers were baffled. And they asked the Rebbe how he had accomplished this miraculous feat. And the Rebbe replied, I told my assistant in the kitchen to break several dishes at the precise moment that the man sat down. And this made the Rebbe's disciples very happy because they knew that they had such a brilliant Rebbe, the man with the glass legs.
Ja, Herr Betzig, wir werden sehen mit unseren eigenen Augen, wie der Rebbe geht dann. Eure Babbe, alle Huben sehen Sie dem Tanz. Oi, du Kinder, der Rebbe allein, ein Kinder allein. Gläsner, spielt jetzt, wie hat noch keinmal nicht gespielt. Ja. Hoi, Freiler. La 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 la.
Horrible world. A young man once came to the Rebbe pouring out his bitter heart. Rebbe, the world is so awful, terrible, evil. What can I do? You are so right, my child, said the Rebbe. I suggest that you go out and you change the world. And so the young man ran out with the best of intentions, ready to change the world. And a week went by, a month went by, and the young man came back. Oy, Rebbe, I tried, but I couldn't change the world. Instead, you should see what goes on in our shtetl. It's horrible, disgusting, and wretched. You're right, my boy, the Rebbe agreed. I suggest that you go out and change the shtetl. So the young man left all excited and full of hope, and he was ready to change the shtetl. A week passed by, a month, and the man returns. Oy, Rebbe, I tried to change the shtetl, but it was impossible. I couldn't make it any better, and I am so miserable and disgusted and unhappy. And the Rebbe replied, my son, if you are so unhappy and miserable, I suggest that you change yourself first. It's a horrible, horrible world. Vilna. Vilna is a big city. So the city of Vilna is also known as Vilnius in Lithuania. And it was known for their great Torah and secular scholars and writers. Here is the tale of Jewish urban life. Vilna is a big city. One day, a Jew returned, he actually ventured out to the city of Vilna. And when he came back to his shtetl, he didn't have adequate words to describe what he saw in the big city of Vilna. And when he was asked by the shtetl Jews, tell us, what have you seen in the city of Vilna? He replied, the Jews of Vilna are extraordinary people. The small town folk didn't understand what he meant by extraordinary. So he explained, he said, I saw a Jew who swayed back and forth over the Talmud studying day and night. And I saw a Jew that pursued business interests day and night. And I saw a Jew who ran after women day and night. And I saw a Jew that ran away from women like from a wild fire day and night. I saw a Jew who used to run around day and night with the red flag shouting revolution. And I even saw a Jew who ran around shouting down with the revolution. And so the shtetl Jews asked him, they said, why are you so amazed? What is so extraordinary? After all, Vilna is a big city and all kinds of Jews live there. To which the traveler replied victoriously, don't you understand? I am talking about one and the same Jew. And that, my friends, is Vilna, is a big city. And finally, there are 3 short stories that I would like to share with you that embrace the humor and the wisdom of the Jewish people. What about the little crickets and the worms? So the first story is about a mother, her child, and the great empathy of the Jewish people. What about the little crickets and the worms? Take a good look, my child, at how the one above has set up everything in the world in an orderly fashion, said the mother to her child. The birds lay their eggs in their nests, and when the baby birds come out of their shells, the father bird and the mother bird begin to feed their babies with little crickets and little worms, and the baby birds thank and praise the Lord for his exceptional goodness. And the wise child turned to his mother and innocently asked, Mother dear, do the little crickets and the little worms also thank and praise the Lord when the baby birds eat them up? The second is a lesson on the ways of the world, and it's called, What Do You See? One day, a poor man came to his rabbi, complaining, Rebbe, why are there so many poor people while others are so rich? And the Rebbe said, come with me to the window. Look out and tell me, what do you see? So the poor man looked out of the window. He said, well, let's see. I see people, I see trees, I see flowers, I see birds, I see children. And the Rebbe replied, good. Now come with me to the mirror. And now tell me, what do you see? The man looked in the mirror. He said, well, I see my face, I see my nose, I see my eyes, my chin. And the Rebbe said, you see, my good man, both the window and the mirror are made out of glass, but the mirror's back is silver, so you see only yourself. And the same goes for many rich men, rich people. They are people like you and me. But when their pockets are full of silver and gold, many of them only see themselves. What do you see? And finally, the Rebbe and the Israeli bus driver. Rebbe Yisrael was a pious man, a devout man, who lived in the Holy Land, and he followed all the commandments. He led a very humble life. He was teaching young boys the Torah. He had a small school. His cheder was always filled with young men who couldn't sit still. They were looking out the window, envious of the children who were free to play ball outside. And the boys never wanted to pray, but Reb Yisrael kept a tight grip on them, and he wouldn't let them out until late at night, after the sun had set. He waited until the boys were so exhausted, and only then would he send them home. And one day, Reb Yisrael passed away, Olav Sholem, and he came to heaven. And he was told by the angel Gabriel, the keeper of the heavenly gates in paradise, to sit down and wait his turn. Next to him in the waiting room was an Israeli bus driver, whom the rabbi actually knew quite well. Now, he knew that that man, the Israeli bus driver, was not devout. He traveled and he smoked on the Shabbos. He ate non-kosher food. He never visited the synagogue. He didn't keep any of the commandments, and he blasphemed against God on a regular basis. What was this lowly bus driver doing at the pearly gates? Rebbe Yisrael wanted to know. But one doesn't ask questions when it comes to heavenly justice. You just sit and you wait. And suddenly, the gates of paradise opened, and the angel Gabriel came out and invited the Israeli bus driver to enter paradise with great fanfare. And the Rebbe couldn't understand this injustice. He couldn't understand what was happening. Why was this godless, irreverent, sinful man welcomed into paradise first, while he, the Rebbe, who was pious and devout all his life, he ate kosher, he kept most of the commandments, he did good deeds, and he even lived most of his life with an unattractive wife. Why was he forced to wait? This mamzer was welcomed into paradise first. Where was justice? So the Rebbe turned to the angel Gabriel, the keeper of the gate, with a very heavy heart. And he asked him, he said, "My dear angel Gabriel, why was the Israeli bus driver welcomed into paradise, while I, who have kept many of the commandments, I ate kosher all my life, I did good deeds, I even lived for many years, most of my life, with an unattractive wife, I'm disregarded and I'm asked to wait?" To which the angel Gabriel replied, "You see, Rebbe Yisrael, you were forcing little boys to learn the Torah and the commandments from morning till night until the boys fell asleep, and they never wanted to pray. But this Israeli bus driver used to drive his bus so wildly that all of his passengers instantly became extremely devout and prayed with all their might." And that, my friends, is the Rebbe and the Israeli bus driver. So I thank you for enjoying. I hope you enjoyed this lecture and these curious rabbinic tales, the shortest tall stories. And I am more than happy to answer any questions. As everybody mentioned earlier, my mother and I created an organization a few years ago called the Yiddishkeit Initiative. And we actually have branded ourselves and our website as YI, Yiddishkeit Initiative, yilovejewish.org. And you can find hundreds of our programs. Ever since COVID, we've been doing a lot of these Zooms, and all of them are recorded. We've done concerts and lectures and poetry readings and stories and panel discussions and play readings, and it's all on our website. Most of it is free. We have a few latecomers coming in because they didn't set their clocks back. And so they've arrived for the end of our lecture. And you can also purchase all of my mother's books. We have a lot of merchandise. We have a lot of upcoming events. We have Purim shows coming up. As a matter of fact, we're about to publish a beautiful little booklet for children called Purim is a Time for Fun, a musical Megillah and coloring book. And so we have lots of different books. My mother's biography, A Breed Apart. Her other book, which also is a beautiful story of just gorgeous stories about the Aleph Bet, Legends of the Aleph Beis, the Aleph Bet, the origins of the alphabet. And we've even turned that into a coloring book. Coloring books are very popular today. And not to mention, of course, those of you who can read Yiddish, and I know that one of my mother's former students is here, the preeminent textbook for Yiddish is called The Key to Yiddish. It's 700 pages long, but you have to be able to read Yiddish in order to enjoy it. So that is actually one of our bestsellers. So hopefully you'll go visit our website. And now we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Avi, that's a wonderful presentation. It's really great. I was thinking you did not read one story about your mother visiting the Rebbe Muzhoyer together with your father.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it because she was a reporter. And we are talking about, 40 years ago? And for being a reporter and covering the ultra-Orthodox, that some of them up to today, they will not talk to women, or they definitely will. And she is sitting in the front, and she doesn't care about anybody who asks her, hey, excuse me, you are a woman, you cannot sit here, you should sit at the back. And she said, well, I'm not a woman. So what are you? I'm the press. Right. I mean, I think this was a wonderful thing. And to be a women reporter and to report about the ultra-Orthodox, it's something that she really had to have the chutzpah to do it and the courage to do it. And this is really, she should get a lot of credit for it.
Right. Yes, it is a beautiful story called the Muzhoyer Rebbe. And the only reason I didn't read it is because it's very, very long. And so it becomes a lot harder to fit it into a 45-minute program.
Well, of course.
Actually, 50-minute program, almost 55 minutes already, and still leave time for questions and answers.
Good.
Thank you for bringing me up.
I just want to put I want to put a plug in for the book that you all I'm sure will want to have it as part of your collection. One of the things about the book that I especially love is before every story there's a Yiddish saying. There's a like the saying, no one knows whose shoe pinches except the person who walks in it. I've heard that one before. And this one, words should be weighed, not counted. That's terrific. And at any rate, a heavy purse makes for a light heart. There's stories that you'll love to share. There's sayings that you will absolutely treasure. And I just want to say a big thank you to you. By the way, when you were one question came from Marlene about a town in, I'm
Kherson,
not
yes,
sure
in
where it
Ukraine.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kherson
yeah,
in
Kherson.
Ukraine. Yep.
Yeah.
Did all the Jews in Kherson perish during World War II is the question from Marlene. Look, the answer
Yes.
is probably yes, or certainly the vast majority of the Jews in Ukraine were, sent to the camps, except those who were able to escape into Russia, like my mother. My mother went from Poland to Russia and survived the war in Russia and then came back after the war. So many of the Jews of Kherson, many of the Jews of Ukraine, my father's village, which, when he was born, he thought it was Hungary, then it was Czechoslovakia. Well, apparently now it's Ukraine. And of course, all the Jews of his shtetl were sent to Auschwitz, and he too survived Auschwitz. So the answer, Marlene, unfortunately, is probably the answer is yes. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything?
Questions? Raise your hands.
Well, Pesach, you want to say a few words?
Yes, apparently we have a
Right,
student of my
right,
mother's.
right.
Hold on, you can unmute.
You
Pesach,
have
you
to
have to unmute.
unmute.
Unmute yourself.
You have to unmute, Paul.
Pesach, you have to unmute. Right.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you
Yeah.
Okay, well,
There.
I'm going to say this in English for the benefits of those who don't, but actually, I first met Miriam Hoffman 35 years ago. In another few months, it'll be Svei Mulchai. At that time, I was a student at the Uriel Weinreich Intense Yiddish Summer Program at Columbia University in New York. At the close of the program, I was chosen class valedictorian. Miriam Hoffman, who at that time was a journalist with the Forwards, was there and interviewed me for the Forwards, for the newspaper. Since that time, my wife and I have seen Miriam at a number of Yiddish events, both in Los Angeles and more recently here in Florida, where my wife and I moved 8 years ago. We also know her son, the accomplished Yiddish and English actor, Avi Hoffman, whom we've had the privilege of seeing on stage. In the name of the Greater Miami Jewish Genealogical Society, I welcome Miriam and Avi Hoffman to our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
That was
good.
the
Thank you
introduction.
so much.
That was the
Thank you.
introduction. Do I need
Yeah.
do I need to do the whole lecture over again now?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but we thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. And I want to give a special thanks also to Rick Wolf. Rick, thank you for spreading the word. And if you know people who were not able to be here for this, it is recorded. You can go to tbam.org/streaming, and you'll find the program so you can share with other people.
I have a question.
And yes, Paulette.
Hi. Wonderful to see the two of you, or actually all of you. I was wondering where your grandparents lived and how would you is their accent different from people from Polish speaking Yiddish or Lithuanian?
Sure, Mom. Where did your parents live? Lodz, which has
Lodz.
Lodz, Poland, which has a
Lodz.
totally different dialect than everywhere else.
Yes.
The famous comedian, the Yiddish comedian Jigan, Shimon Jigan, and Schumacher. Jigan and Schumacher were very famous Yiddish comedians, and they came from Lodz, and he would say "vuin, vuin," which was a Lodz accent, because you would say "vos" if you were a Litvak, you would say "vus" if you were a Galicianer, but if you were from Lodz, you said "vuin." And so, yes, the answer is there were different dialects in every area of Europe.
So when you meet other Yiddish speakers, are you able to distinguish where they came from?
Sometimes, yeah. Most people today don't really, unless they are original Yiddish speakers, Mama Loshen, don't really know. They're learning kind of a klal Yiddish, like a general Yiddish.
Ah,
And so, um, it's unless the big difference, of course, is the Litvaks and Galiciani. Those are the two major difference. So one
Right.
person says eins, that would be a Litvak, and one says eins, eins zwei, eins zwei. So that kind of is the first giveaway of any accent. Um, but generally speaking, today's Yiddish speakers are learning Klal Yiddish, which is mostly Litvak, Yivo Yiddish. But yes, if somebody says to me "vuin," I know they come from Europe.
so second question is, did you ever do a recording of songs in Yiddish? I would love to hear you sing.
I have many recordings, certainly my 3 shows. Again, if you go to our website,
Okay,
whyilovejewish.org, and go to all of it's, I think it says Why I Live, and it has all of our live programs.
Yes.
You'll hear me sing in dozens of them. I have my shows, Too Jewish 2, and Still Jewish after all these years. But then I also have a Joe Papp show. There are many concerts, many festivals, Yiddish tangos. Yes, so if you want to hear me sing, you can find it for free on our website. Which
wonderful.
actually brings me to the point that most of our programming, if not all, virtually all, of our programs are free to the public. We don't want people who can't afford to pay to not be able to enjoy Yiddishkeit. But that means we are desperately trying to raise money all the time. So I ask you all to go to our website. There are several buttons that say donate now, become a member, or donate. And if you can spare a couple of dollars, or 18 or 180 or 1,000, that would be great. Anybody who wants to give more than $500, let me know, and I'll talk to you personally, and you'll become a special member of the organization. But we really need your help, especially now, because ever since the war in Ukraine broke out, many of the Jewish philanthropists and Jewish organizations who generally give are now giving to Ukraine justifiably. And so that leaves many of the smaller Jewish organizations and cultural organizations like ours a little bit in a bind. So please, we would welcome your support in any amount, the more the better. So, Ashenim Dan.
Avi, when is your
Thank you
next,
so much.
Avi,
I
when
was
is your
just
next
going to,
Hold
live?
on, Yoram has a question. Yes,
Yeah.
Yoram.
Avi,
yeah.
when is your next live event?
You know what? I don't have the calendar in front of me, but if you go to the website, it says events. And if you go to whyilovejewish.org/events, we have about 30, 40, 50 events coming up in the next few months. Starting with Purim next week, we have 3 days of Purim events. Then we're doing a special live benefit in Boca Raton for those of you who might be willing to drive to Boca. We're doing a benefit event, a solidarity event for Ukraine. And then after that, we have a whole series of events. In April, we have Passover, we have Yom HaShoah. We do 3 times a year, we commemorate the Holocaust on Kristallnacht, January 27th, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Yom HaShoah. And we always do events on those days. In May, we'll be doing things for Israel. Every month we do events. And as I said, most or virtually most of our events are either free or you can donate any amount, $1, in order to register for the event. And so we want to make sure that everything we do is not only the highest quality, but it's available to everybody, regardless of their financial condition or situation.
So what do you take to get all this energy?
I wish I had the answer. A lot of coffee. I drink an enormous amount of caffeine. And so, hopefully it won't upset my stomach too much.
Yeah.
But basically, coffee is really my drug of choice.
Okay. Etta, the podium is yours. Thank you so much.
Anybody
Well,
else?
Yoram, yeah, do you have any other announcements? Yoram, we will meet again in 3 weeks for the
Yes.
first part of a 2-part program brought to us by the Jewish Genealogy Society. And Yoram, we thank you so much for introducing us in person to the Hoffmans.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
My pleasure.
All the best, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, all.
All right, so Yoram, I'm gonna leave, and then once the recording is done, I will reach out to you and make sure we get the recording.
Good. Great.
All right. Okay. Seid gesund, everybody.
Seid gesund.
Bye bye.
You